What is a good checklist for writing a grant? Today in this video, we're going to be diving into this critical question. And by the end of the video, you'll have a good start in terms of a clear understanding of where to begin your checklist. I'm Benjamin Dean from grantgating.com. I hope you enjoy this video and the others on this channel aimed at helping you get more grants. And be sure to check out the link in the description where you'll get a starter checklist for getting out there and making sure you don't make any mistakes, you don't miss anything on your proposals. So in this video, we're going to cover three of the most common sort of things that need to be on your checklist. Number one is your research and preparation. So let's start with this because this really is the first step. Before writing any grant proposal, it's essential to gather all the relevant information. You're going to begin by researching the grant-making organization to understand its mission, its goals, and its funding priorities. Okay, this step again is after you've gone through, you've researched, maybe you found 15 or 20 different grants that you might be eligible for. You've done some sort of prioritization and you've landed on this one. Okay, so now you're looking at how does what I want to do fit within what this grantor wants in terms of usage of their funding, not in terms of what they fund or eligible expenses, but higher level. What is the purpose of this funding organization? Why do they exist? Now, you're going to find some of this in the RFP. You're going to find some of this language in the actual application, but you're going to find a lot more of this in the website, in the social media that's managed by that organization, in press releases, in the things that they are marketing, in the things that they are promoting or putting out there in the community. For the most part, that's going to be a great lens, a wonderful lens into what it is this organization cares about. A lot of the priorities are going to be bullet point listed out. This is what we care about. This is what we fund. This is what we don't care about. This is what we don't fund. So some of it's going to be pretty straightforward, but somebody who's more sophisticated in doing this research is going to be able to find several more things that should be considered as you write the grant proposal. So the idea here is you want to support yourself to write the best proposal possible. You may have already decided this is the one. This is one that I'm going to go for. I've never gone for it before, and it just seems like a good fit. Great. So how are you going to make your grant proposal the best that it possibly can be? Well, the answer to that question is a function of how well you have researched this funder and how well you've organized that research so that it is accessible as you're making your way through the grant. Okay, so this is the fit of your organization within what the grantor is looking for, implied or explicitly told to you. Okay, next, you're going to assess the needs of your organization and how this grant addresses those needs. Okay, so you might get to this stage, and we're still on point one, step one here. You might get to this stage and say, this funder is a perfect fit for our organization. They care about kids and education in urban cities. That's what we do. This is a match. Now, is it a match in terms of what they will actually fund? So many times this is getting into eligible and ineligible expenses. It'll get into program costs. It'll get, versus say capacity building, infrastructure building costs. You may have your program costs covered by a donor or by another grant. And what you really need is to build some infrastructure in your program. You need some additional equipment. You need a vehicle. You need an office. You need some structure. All right. Well, you might get into the details of a grant and infrastructure is not allowed. No physical assets are allowed. No equipment over $2,000 is allowed. Things like that. And then, this might not be a good fit for you. It might not be a fit in terms of what you actually need. So is it worth your time to go after something in terms of costs that you already have covered? Now, there's a way to play that, of course, going to the previous funders that have given you money and said, hey, I'm applying for this grant. If we get this grant, would you be okay if I used your money for these critical infrastructure needs that we have? everything's negotiable and everything is up for conversation. But to this point, you really need to understand what exactly is allowed to be funded. Okay, funded. Now, in addition to that, as you're looking at what is, a fit for you in terms of what they're going to provide, you're also going to look at some of the other requirements, things like financial statements, audits, letters of support, project plans. Do you have those things, right? Do you have them right now? Is that something that you need to take a couple months to get and therefore are going to miss the deadline, right? Just sort of high level, do you have everything to actually apply? All right. So this is number one. There's, dozens of other things to consider, but the broad category in terms of a checklist is your research in terms of your fit within their program and their program within yours, right? With what you actually need. And then organizing this in a way that once you get to step 2 here, which we'll go through, you can see it, you can access it. Okay, so point 2 in terms of your checklist is drafting. Okay, so it's not so much, hey, we're just going to write it. You want to draft it. And the purpose of drafting is to create a clear and concise application, given the restraints that you have in any one application, to be able to touch upon all the points that you know are innovative or that you know are differentiating on your end, as well as touching on all the points that you've brought in from your research. So, for example, you might find in your research, oh my gosh, I did a scan of the previous 3 years cohorts of grantees. I see that our type of organization is being funded in these particular areas. This is something they care about. So I'm going to make another note and say, be sure in the drafting of my grant application that I mention some similarities to a previously funded grantee. Or I might just highlight some of the aspects of my program that you know or you intuit was important in that organization giving funding to another nonprofit. Okay, so structuring your proposal. A well-organized proposal is not only going to be very easy to read, but it is persuasive. So persuasion is not necessarily manipulation. It's almost always not manipulation. Having structure is persuasive. It tells the reader that you care, that you've thought about it, that you didn't just sit down at the last minute and blast out what was top of mind, that you really took the time to outline things and draft them. So you're going to start by outlining the key sections of your proposal. These will be things like the executive summary, the statement of need, project description, budget justification, sustainability, and some degree of conclusion or concluding statements. In the executive summary, you want to provide a concise overview of the project and its significance. Typically, the executive summary is going to be more open-ended in terms of what the grantor is going to be asking for in that section. And typically, you're going to want to write that last. You're going to want to see, did I hit every one of the points that I wanted to hit? And maybe there's one or two that you just couldn't find the right place for it, highlighting them in terms of a clause at the beginning of a sentence or a clause at the end if you're dealing with very tight character counts. That is important. Okay. The statement of need needs to clearly articulate the problem that you aim to address in direct language. The project description, you have to, or you should, be touching on the objectives or the goals or the outcomes or, multiple of them, depending on what is asked for later in the application. So your application needs to talk to itself. It needs to be self-contained. It needs to be cohesive. And what will happen, what I have seen happen many times, is people just sit down and they're great writers and they know their program and they know how to talk about what it is that they do, but they don't tie things within the application to each other. They don't use technical writing skills. They use more sales skills, which is absolutely part of this. They use storytelling, which is absolutely part of this. But in terms of a checklist, outlining things, being able to know that there are 3 required expected outcomes that need to be tracked in this program application, in this grant application. So you're probably going to want to reference, if not each one individually, them collectively in your program description. Okay, you're going to want to tease that. You're going to want to put in something around program evaluation, even if it's not a requirement, these sorts of things. Okay. The budget, once we get to that section, that really needs to be done fairly soon when you start a grant application, because that will many times be the first thing that a funder looks at, the budget and budget justification. It really needs to detail out the funds that will be allocated, and you need to justify the costs. So the more time you have thinking about this and planning this, in terms of like actual time before an open date or before a close date, the less scrambling you will be doing to be able to justify outside of a budget justification, okay, which is something that will really help you. The conclusion should reiterate your commitment and impact to the grant. It should restate things. You should think about having more powerful statements in there about call to action for the funder to join you on your vision to have a healthier community, or to have, X, Y, and Z, getting into things like your big, hairy, audacious goal of your organization, your long-term vision. Your concluding statements can bring together some of the more technical elements of the grant application while being human and saying, we're going to do all this, we're going to have great outcomes, and here's where we're going. And we are so excited to have you a part of this. But the only way you're going to be able to get to those compelling concluding statements in each section, or generally in the application, is if you outline things. Okay, so this is the point here, is to take the time to draft and to outline your application before you start dumping words in to the online form. Okay, number 3 here is, generally speaking, review and submission. So this is its own step, right? Saying that, okay, you've done your research, you know your program, you put everything together, and you've got it outlined, you've got the things fairly well figured out, and what you're really looking at is a draft. It's essential to review this meticulously. So videos on this channel are going to talk about many different ways that you can do that and solicit outside help. But generally speaking, you do not want to be the only set of eyes that reviews a grant application. Now, you can do it, you can win grants, but in terms of a best practice, not a good idea to be the only one. A best practice would be to involve other stakeholders. Some of those stakeholders might be people who know your organization very well from the inside. That might be a key volunteer or a staff member who looks at it and says, hey, Benjamin, you know what? You said that we can do this thing on this timeline, but hey, you didn't think about this other commitment we have. We have staff time allocated here. How are we going to do both? Right? You might be a little bit overzealous in your timeline. So having somebody internal to your organization's operations is important to review that program structure. You want to have a board member. Generally speaking, whether you're a freelance grant writer on the outside, so to speak, or you're internally as an executive director or director of development, having the board's understanding and review of grants is pretty important. That's something that may not directly benefit this grant, although it sometimes can, but it strengthens the organization's bond between staff and board. Okay, so that's somebody else you could bring into the review process. And then finally, an outside person, somebody that you have within your network that doesn't know your organization well, that can actually give you fresh eyes, somebody competent, somebody who's smart in terms of being able to digest and comprehend this type of information and can give you that feedback. This type of person might be somebody who is not necessarily on the grant review panel for this grant, but it might be somebody on another grant review panel, okay, volunteer, or a staff member of another organization that does this. Hey, can you take 15 minutes to review this application for this funder? I'd really appreciate any cursory information you can give. How does this section land with you? Right? So seeking feedback is critical. Once you're confident that your proposal is polished, you've taken into account the feedback that you need, then you're going to submit it. Now, submitting again is its own process, and there's a lot of things that can jump up to top of priority list. Once you get into submission, this gets back to understanding the funder's requirements. But one of the things that happens is the required attachments are not prepared and you're scrambling to do those, or you forget to include them. This is one where you're not going to get a little error message many times. So you'll have some applications that'll say, in the following section below, please upload these 5 documents. Okay. And you upload 3 of them. That online system may not flag it and say, hey, you only updated 3 out of the 5. There might be an assumption that in one of those 3, you've got 2 other required documents. You just pinned them all together in a PDF. Okay. So that is something that happens, making sure you have your own checklist for all the required documentation that you need. You want to double check it. And really a best practice would be to have somebody on your team, internal to your organization, as a matter of process. Every time you've got everything in there in the online system, most systems are going to be online. Before you click submit, you have somebody actually review the application in the online system. Okay, it's one thing to review it outside of the system in your docs that you're creating, and it's a whole nother thing to look at it inside the system. Okay, some of the other things that will come up here are formatting. So you might have these beautiful bullet point lists and sub bullet point lists, and then you bring that into the simple text box that you have, and it is all scrambled up. You might have had special characters that you didn't even think about. When you pasted them in, they look all funky and they've been changed in the actual online portal. That sort of review, again, it's just not going to look good if it's difficult to read. It's not something that's, if it's not something that's skimmable and digestible, you're going to get knocked, even if there's not something on the rubric that says, is this application digestible? It's going to color the rest of the application's review. So this is a start on a grant writing checklist, and it is a strategic tool that's going to ensure, once developed for you, that you cover all the necessary bases. You're going to want to focus on these 3 basic areas: research preparation, structuring the proposal and drafting it, and then the review process. So down in the description, don't forget to download a bit more of a start with some plain language around a checklist. This resource will help equip you creating your own checklist or just starting off with this. It's a great place to start. And then, think about, what are your big challenges? What is a good checklist for you? That sort of thing. In the comment section below, feel free to write some of your biggest challenges in terms of keeping things straight, preparation, drafting, submission, and we'll see if there's any input that I can give there as well. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.